From US, it's Professor Margolis, and from China, Professor Shao, and from Russia, Nikonov, Professor Nikonov, Professor Mazus, Professor Vasilyeva, Professor Tsibin, Professor Loginov, and others. Professor Tsaganova.
Мария, я все-таки продолжу тогда. Но я продолжу представлять российских коллег. Это профессор Васильева Елена Юрьевна, главный кардиолог города Москвы, профессор Цыбин Александр Николаевич, главный внештатный специалист по лабораторной диагностике, академик Лагунов Денис Юрьевич, заместитель директора научно-исследовательского института имени Гамалеи, доктор Гущин Владимир, руководитель лаборатории механизма популяционной изменчивости, доктор Серебряков, заведующий организационно-методическим отделом по ВИЧ, инфекции Департамента здравоохранения, и доктор Альшанский, заведующий Центральной лабораторией диагностики ВИЧ-инфекции. Кроме того, с нами Елена Валерьевна Цыганова и Маргарита Гейна, врач клинической лабораторной диагностики из Центральной лаборатории ВИЧ-инфекции. У нас сценарий сегодня следующий. У нас будет доклад доктора Гущина Владимира Алексеевича, и дальше у нас будет дискуссия. Мария, пожалуйста.
Professor Nikonov just mentioned our colleagues from Russia, and first of all, we will start with the talk of Professor Gushin, and then we will discuss several questions about already mentioned topics.
Я предлагаю начать. И, Владимир Алексеевич, вы готовы?
Да, спасибо, уважаемые коллеги, за представление.
Ага, сейчас, секундочку. Профессор Мазус попросил слово буквально.
Вот, прекрасно. Я добавлю чуть-чуть к представлению. У нас сложилась очень хорошая конструкция с нашими коллегами из Америки, из Германии, и достаточно плодотворно мы поработали и продолжаем работать в условиях новой COVID-инфекции.
Words from Professor Mazus. I think that we have a really good work together, international collaboration, and in the context of coronavirus disease, and I hope that we will continue our discussion and work together.
Вместе с тем я очень благодарен моему другу, профессору Шау. Мы вместе начали тоже эту большую работу, и еще раз мои слова благодарности ему за нашу первую встречу с уважаемыми коллегами из Китая, которая была им, так сказать, там организована.
And also I want to say that I'm really grateful to Professor Shao, who organized the first teleconference with China about coronavirus disease.
Очень важно, что сегодня мы находимся уже на новом этапе работы с этой инфекцией.
It's so important that today we are working on the next step of coronavirus disease treatment.
Мы уже знаем намного больше, чем это было 3 месяца назад, когда появились первые больные. Мы очень многого достигли. У нас во всех странах мы уже всерьез разговариваем о вакцинах. У нас переболели значительное количество людей, многих из которых мы спасли. Некоторых нам не, так сказать, там удалось спасти, и они погибли. Тем не менее, сегодня новый этап, когда мы смотрим уже историю и формируем понимание популяционного иммунитета.
Today we are on a new step of coronavirus treatment, and we now know more than we knew in the beginning of the epidemic. And today we're discussing vaccines and other treatment strategies. It is important to say that in the beginning we started to treat our patients. Some of our strategies were successful and some not. A lot of patients are recovered, but some patients, unfortunately, we couldn't rescue from this disease.
И сегодня мы вступаем в эпоху понимания серологической диагностики. Каким образом эта, так сказать, диагностика будет применима в нашей работе как диагностика, либо как инструмент исследования популяционного иммунитета.
And now we are starting to investigate serology and immunology of COVID-19, and we will investigate population immunology in our countries, and also some ways of treatment, immunological treatment of this disease.
Я передаю слово Владимиру Гущину для его доклада как раз по этому вопросу. Мы договорились, что мы будем, начнем с этого доклада. Сегодня сложилась, она вообще, так сказать, была, но и вот в новой инфекции такое очень серьезное партнерство с нашим ведущим центром страны. Ну, я думаю, что Владимир это расскажет сам. Пожалуйста.
Алексей Израилевич, спасибо большое за представление. Greeting, dear colleagues. I'd like to thank the organizer for the amazing opportunity to participate in such a meeting, to present and report our valuable guests on our applied perspective studies concerning SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19, undergoing in the National Research Center of Epidemiology and Microbiology. In this report, I will talk about the major fields of research on SARS-CoV-2, in which we are actively developing alongside with Health Department of Moscow. COVID-19 pandemic caused by for healthcare systems of many countries. As it became evident now and clear that healthcare systems of very developed countries weren't ready for coronavirus epidemic. More than 8 million of
Зависли, Владимир. Попробую переместиться.
Владимир, у вас выключен микрофон. Владимир Алексеевич, включите микрофон.
Коллеги, меня слышно сейчас?
Да, вот сейчас слышно.
Извините, пожалуйста, видимо, связь отключилась на небольшое время. I'll start again from demonstration of my screen. I'm here now. COVID-19 pandemic caused by SARS-CoV-2 became a tremendous tragedy for healthcare systems of many countries. As it became evident, healthcare systems of highly developed countries weren't ready for such epidemic. More than 8 million of confirmed cases and 400,000 of deaths around the world highlight the greatest concern of the ongoing epidemic. However, economic losses caused by following restrictions and lockdowns have even deeper consequences. Meanwhile, this epidemic isn't the first one in humankind history and possibly wouldn't be the last one. This experience we are acquiring now is highly relevant for our prosperous future. Development and optimization of epidemiological countermeasures would soften economic damages in the future. So during this talk, I will embrace the most promising fields of research on combating COVID-19 pandemic, which are undergoing in our center, Gamaleya. From the very beginning of the epidemic, the development situation in China and from various statements of China's official in early January 2020, the Gamaleya Center has been involved in preparing for epidemic to come to our country. The open position of Chinese government allowed the world community of scientists to learn quite early about etiological agents SARS-CoV-2, which caused an outbreak in the city of Wuhan, Hubei. Access to the virus sequence published by Chinese scientists in GenBank and later on GIS8 allowed us to immediately create tools for molecular epidemiology laboratory PCR systems. So having this sequence, we have created 2 PCR systems for detecting the virus. The first system is reagent kit for extraction and qualitative determination of SARS-CoV-2 coronavirus RNA by SARS-CoV-2 PCR method. This method received now IVD certificate allowing its use for diagnostic purposes. Of all the PCR systems existing on the Russian medical market, it has the highest sensitivity, making it possible to detect up to 500 copies of coronavirus RNA per milliliter of initial sample and around 5 copies of viral RNA in the reaction. It's a pretty high sensitivity. The second developed system was a multiplex systems that allows differential diagnostics and identification of patients with COVID-19 among patients with influenza, a RT-PCR test. We call it SARS-CoV-2 influenza A and B. This system is used for retrospective analysis of samples by influenza centers during the second wave. So both systems have become routine tool for analysis by influenza centers. And our center, thanks to the use of our developed PCR systems and collection of virus isolates from patient COVID-19 was created. Our center was the first center in our country to publish a genome-wide follow-up for the virus isolated using cell culture in Russia. At the moment, we have identified dozens of isolates, and these isolates has been sequenced and deposited in Russian state viral collection, which is located in our center. And this collection now, sequences of these collected samples now available, uploaded at the GIS8 sequence database and available to everyone who is interested in this kind of sequences. Obviously, it's necessary to continue isolating of new strains, sequencing and investigating the properties of these isolates in order to monitor the variability and its potential negative impact on the effectiveness of diagnostics, prevention, and treatment. Now we are conducting quite a big studies where we're collecting samples from 500 patients with a detailed description of clinical picture as well as a collection of biomaterials including swabs, serum, plasma on first, fifth, and 14 days. According to our idea, such a study should be carried out at a continuous basis. The current collection will become basis for the further studies of variability of coronavirus in our country, and as well as a basis for testing of analytical properties of IVD tests. Thus, because of creation of the collection of SARS-CoV-2 isolates, we were able to open other important directions of our work. Firstly, to access the quality of PCR test systems. This work was done together with Ministry of Health and especially Roszdravnadzor, which is responsible for evaluation of tests before IVD certification. At the moment, this collection is also used for studies of effectiveness of drugs on cell culture to justify off-label use and in searching for promising drugs for further implementation in clinical practice. Due to the presence of panel of SARS-CoV-2 isolates, now we have evaluated more than 30 approved systems registered in Russia for IVD diagnostics. And we think it's important direction because it provides quality of diagnosis. As part of the study of drugs in Gamaleya Center, we regularly carry out work to assess the cytotoxicity and effectiveness of drugs with various mechanisms of antiviral action. The relevance of choosing effective methods of pharmacotherapy of COVID-19 among existing and registered and prescribed manner drugs for medical use as off-label. We think that it's extremely important in the absence of specific etiology therapy, try to identify some medicine that still can work. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we have studied more than 34 substances of direct acting drugs, like drugs that inhibit RNA-dependent RNA polymerase or viral protease, cap-dependent influenza endonuclease, and other indirect drugs, which is mostly immunotropic drugs, which stimulate immune system and improves outcome. Another important area of the development in our center is the use of plasma of convalescents. Based on the clinical data of WHO and FDA, it was allowed to use convalescent plasma as a treatment for patients with COVID-19 and terminal stages of disease within the framework of emergency use. On the April 1st, 2020, the Moscow Department of Health issued an order on the introduction of technology for the use of frozen fresh plasma for convalescent donors COVID-19 for the treatment of patients with severe COVID-19. That the Gamaleya Center of Ministry of Health together with Moscow City Health Department are currently conducting studies of neutralizing activity of blood plasma of patients with convalescent infection, patients who treated and who recovered and whose plasma is suitable for such purposes. The main objective is to analyze plasma from potential donors to determine highly active blood plasma suitable for transfusion in patients with severe COVID-19. Today, more than 2,600 blood plasma samples of donors have been analyzed. It has been shown that 95% of patients have neutralizing antibodies for SARS-CoV-2 virus in titer more than 1 to 20 or higher. The share of convalescent with highly active plasma is about 20%. Virus neutralization titer for plasmas with titer more than 1 to 160 and above. If we take precisely look at a group of people who have virus neutralization titer more than 1 to 80, we have 41% of donors who has suitable plasma. The reference method for screening blood plasma samples is direct neutralization antibodies. It's direct virus neutralization method of SARS-CoV-2 in cell culture. Given the need of use of special conditions like working with pathogenic strains of SARS-CoV-2 virus, which requires BSL-3 and complexity and duration of method, in our hands it takes 100 hours, and large-scale screening of reconvalescent plasma in all regions of Russian Federation is definitely impossible. Due to this fact, Gamaleya Research Center has developed and registered the test system for determining immunoglobulin G antibodies to S protein and especially receptor binding domain. These test systems has a very high sensitivity, is 94.4% to 100% with confidence level 90%, and this test system has very good specificity, is 95.5 to 100%, and again this confidence level is 90%. And it's another important thing is speed. We can carry out assay for less than 2.5 hours, such systems has been implemented now in laboratory studies of correlation of results obtained using the developed test systems and direct virus neutralization method was evaluated. It was found that diagnostic specificity reagent kit on plasma samples and blood sera of patients undergoing COVID-19 and having virus neutralizing activity is about 94%, which is very good. Using these test systems in the framework of study of neutralizing activity of blood plasma of convalescents, a preliminary screening of blood plasma is currently being carried out to identify donors with highly active plasma. So the use of this preliminary screening on donors can reduce the cost associated with procurement of low activity and inactive in relation to SARS-CoV-2 virus blood plasma convalescents. Using preparation of the blood plasma of donors who have undergone preliminary screening, and the neutralizing activities necessary confirmed in neutralizing reaction on viral cells. So development of immunological assays opens up the possibility to conduct seroepidemiological studies, which is important direction, and especially it is important for planning anti-epidemic measures. Previously in Gamaleya Center, we have created the blood serum bank, which is robotic storage systems with a possibility to deposit up to 500,000 samples of serum and storage at temperature below minus 80 degrees Celsius. This bank is ready for large-scale seroepidemiological studies nationwide. During 2018-2019, we collected more than 30,000 of serum samples from healthy donors. We think that replenishment of this collection with new samples from COVID-19 patients and healthy donors allows us to conduct a study of structure and dynamics of collective immunity formation, as well as presence of cross-reactivity with antibodies to related coronaviruses already circulating in population. Also, this serum bank is an important source which could be used for testing the quality of immunological assays and studying collective immunity. In connection with this, we are planning to study collective immunity to assess dynamics of its formation and modeling second wave of epidemic in Moscow and Russian regions. Thank you very much. I'm ready for your questions.
Большое спасибо, Владимир, за, так сказать, очень интересный доклад. Скажу, что ну, нельзя сказать, что что-то мы тут новое увидели, потому что работали, в общем, вместе, и это, так сказать, достаточно хорошая, там, интересная и очень нужная сегодня работа, и я уверен, что вот эти тест-наборы и, собственно, подход, который был сделан в Москве и с вашим участием, и ваша, так сказать, там разработка, конечно, найдет применение по всей стране.
Thank you very much for your presentation. For me, I don't have any questions because we worked together and I already know all these results. But anyway, I think that this approach could be implemented in Russia, in all regions.
Я бы хотел передать слово профессору Марголису, которым мы очень благодарны за постоянное, так сказать, там участие в наших совещаниях, в нашей работе. И мы уже на эту тему с ним неоднократно взаимодействовали в переписке и тоже, так сказать, там обсуждали. Очень, так сказать, там интересно его мнение. Пожалуйста, Леонид Борисович.
Jimin, you should understand Russian already. Professor Shao. Jimin, you should understand Russian already after so many meetings. Он должен уже, наш друг Шао должен уже по-русски говорить, как мы, после стольких встреч и совместной работы. Ну, я не знаю.
Я думаю, что по-английски.
По-русски или по-английски?
По-английски.
Okay, we'll switch English as its international language. It's very interesting what you presented. I have just a couple of questions, maybe some trivia questions. You measured IgG against FGB. What about, there are some data, not quite confirmed, that maybe anti-IgG against other proteins of coronavirus may be also essential for protection, for cure, like MAN. Can you comment on this, please?
Thank you very much, Professor Margolis. That's a good question. Actually, now we have been planning such work together with Moscow Department of Health because it's important to evaluate not only neutralizing antibodies but also general immunity against S protein, M protein, N protein, and so on, because and especially it's important to see a ratio of antibodies developed to different targets, and I hope that we will carry out such work, especially now we've prepared all recombinant clones, express these proteins purify these proteins. Some of them are ready, some of them in process, but I hope that we will prepare laboratory tests to evaluate some peculiarities and especially correlations with other tests already implemented and used in Moscow. And I hope Moscow Department of Health will support us in this work. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And my other question, it's not criticism. It was a comment about the measuring of sensitivity. And it applied not only to your test, but all the tests which I know developed in Europe and the United States. In my mind, it may slightly exaggerate the sensitivity, because what everybody does, including you, is measure sensitivity by adding viral RNA to your solution and then measure how many RNAs you can measure which exogenously added to your solution before measurement. However, in reality, when you measure patients, you don't add RNA, you add the whole virus. And few people can do this, but I think you can do this based on what you have in your facilities. Try to evaluate the sensitivity of your test not adding, I talk about PCR test, of course, not adding RNA, but adding known viral number of viral particles, which of course you can measure using your facilities in BL3. That will, I think, give some information about the difference between what evaluated as a sensitivity in your test and all other tests which I know in the world, and real sensitivity, which might be very similar or much lower. And that's a big question for testing.
Thank you very much, Professor Margolis. I think it's an important issue, especially because differences between real particles, infectious particles, and these RNAs, substrate which can be amplified, sometimes differ in orders, 1 order or 2 orders or 1.5 orders. It's really a big difference. I think it is possible to use such approaches, especially when we evaluate our initial culture of viral cultures using plaque assay tests or something like that. We know how many infectious particles we have, and then compare this with number of targets, and especially amount of different targets along this pretty long genome might differ significantly. I think here you are right. Some of targets might over-represent real infectious particles.
Again, I would like to emphasize it's not about only your test, but that's a problem for all the tests which I know developed in the world. And my last question, so I don't want to take the stage for long, about sensitivity. So did you do, how many replicates of the same person, and what's the distribution of the number of the amount of antibodies or plus minus antibodies if you measure 5 times of the same patient?
Concerning immunological assay, right?
Yes.
Concerning immunological assays, it's different tests has different reproducibility, but it's lays something in 5%.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Very interesting and a great work.
Thank you very much.
Yes, I also want to congratulate you for your excellent work. So the test you built will be very helpful. I want to just share some of the information from my colleagues in China. There are about 10 to 15 serology tests by different companies used in China. They can be, actually they use either IgG as you did, or IgM alone, or combined IgG and IgM. We call it two antibody test. They also using the different indirect ELISA, semi ELISA, and also the capture ELISA method. They usually measure the sensitivity and specificity with the panel of COVID-19 infected people, like first week, second week, and the third week and later. Usually the antibody sensitivity at the first week is not that high. Usually it's around 20 to 40%. The second week is usually can go up to close to 90%. to 50%. This is usually it's like usually the measure the total antibody is most sensitive. IgM is the second for early samples. IgG is less sensitive for early samples. So the total antibody always better. It's about 10 to 15% higher than either IgM or IgG. So in that case, in our national study, they usually use total antibody test to do large-scale studies. So that is the information collected in our country, which can be as a reference for you.
Thank you very much, Professor Shao. It's a quite complicated question. I would like to say that in Russia now we have more than 30 tests registered as for IVD diagnostics. Actually, most of these tests are PCR tests, and concerning immunological assays, now we still have not so many tests. We have quite most of them immunoglobulin G, for evaluation of immunoglobulin G, and only some tests, especially some tests evaluating immunoglobulin M. I think your question is very good, and we actually working with Moscow Department of Health, very often discuss how these diagnostics and monitoring should look like. Definitely, PCR tests are very useful at the early stages of infection. Our system, for example, of our institute PCR system is capable of detecting virus in 3-4 days prior infection manifestation. And on this stage, there is no immunoglobulin G, no immunoglobulin M, and this first week is also the most important is to use PCR system. And later on, we see only small gap between appearance of immunoglobulin M and immunoglobulin G. It's very often that this window is something, a serological window, something around several days, from 3 to 7 days. And then we can see all markers, PCR, immunoglobulin M, and immunoglobulin G. But concerning immunoglobulin M tests, we still not very confident on some of these tests, and we think we need to develop special panels of immunoglobulin for evaluation of immunoglobulin M to different targets to understand this better. Now we more understand on this PCR story, and we also understand immunoglobulin G, and especially because immunoglobulin G is a marker of protection. So we concentrated on these two sides, early stage and late stage. And now we will have some time to work on this middle stage, working with immunoglobulin M. And I hope we will understand more. Maybe some of targets are not so, good for these diagnostics purposes.
I mainly discussed the serology test because it can be used in large scale. But for early infection, people use the nucleic acid test with the real-time PCR. I could give you two cases. So in about several weeks ago in Wuhan, the epicenter for this COVID-19, the city government decided to test the whole population. It's about 10 million people. They did the nucleic acid test in 10 days for 10 million people. They finished. Everybody in the city. They found no confirmed cases. They found 300 from the 10 million tests, 10 million people, 300 asymptomatic cases. So it's like the city has done a good job. Nobody missed. So the 300 asymptomatic nucleic acid test positive, their close contact, none of them are nucleic acid positive. They try to isolate the virus from the 300. None of them has a virus. So it's like the city is maybe the most clean place in the world for COVID-19. But we have an episode 5 days ago, 2 cases in a farm market in Beijing. So in the last 3 days, the Beijing municipal government, they tested 76,000 people. They found 59 positive cases. So I think I heard the news in the evening. The total test is about 200,000 already done in the last 5 days in Beijing. So less than it's about 59 positive from a 200,000 test. Again, so China do test very fast. The city can test 100,000 people per day. So the scale up. The serology test in China only used for some retrospective studies. Even though we have this 15 to 20 serology diagnostic test by different companies. In addition, we have about 25 nucleic acid tests manufactured by different companies. So that is the case for nucleic acid tests in China.
May I ask you a question, Mike? In this 300 people in Wuhan, which were tested asymptomatic positive for PCR, is there a data that people can release RNA for many, many days past infection when they're already cured? So in this case, 300 were asymptomatic and they were in the middle of the infection, or they passed the infection and just release RNA from virus?
I think it's not, because they followed, none of them become confirmed cases. They have stayed silent, no symptom. They tested 11,000 close contact of the 300, their family members. None of them turned to be positive. They tried to isolate the virus from the 300 people. None of them carry virus. So it's like they have just some trace nucleic acid. They could not even amplify the whole genome. They can find only a fragment of the genome.
Right. So there are data that more than 44 days, some of the cases more than 50 days after all, even on symptomatic patients, when all the symptoms disappear, still release pieces of RNA, which is not the evidence of ongoing infection, but rather an evidence of infection which was passed long ago.
Yes. So I see the epicenter of this COVID-19, the Wuhan city, becomes the most clean place in the world.
Safest place.
Move there.
Safest place. Actually, I have one more question to your comment. You said that these 300 people, what about antibodies in these people? Do they have any signs of specific immunity, immunoglobulin G or immunoglobulin M? in these asymptomatic people?
Yeah, this is, I also want to know. I was just call my colleagues who participated. He just told me they are still doing that. Yeah, they have not released the result yet.
Very good job.
Professor Shao,
Yeah.
thank you for your talk. And what do you think, how long the asymptomatic patient can be dangerous for his family, for surrounders? What do you think? I know, and I understand that you don't have exact answer, but just as expert, what do you think?
I think we saw that the symptomatic patients, if they are pure symptomatic patients, I mean, they are not at the early stage, is on the way to become cases with the symptomatics at a very extremely early infection. If not that, they are after recovered or stay symptomatic, like their immune system can control the virus. We have not yet found they really carry live virus and transmit virus to other people. We have not yet found.
Thank you. Thank you. And in what cases, in what percent of high IgM there is real positive PCR test?
IgM usually is early infection. Usually the IgM positive, I think I heard is over 80% they have nucleic acid positive.
80% both positive, PCR and IgM, yes?
Yeah.
What level of IgM is dangerous for your opinion? What about?
I do not have that the data. Usually IgM is at the early stage of infection.
So you think that is at this situation, if IgM is positive, the patient can be dangerous for his surrounders?
Yeah. Usually we put them if any positive, either IgM or IgG or nucleic acid, we put them into quarantine.
And if sorry,
we don't let them at home, stay home at home to quarantine, self-quarantine. We have this mild case hospital in a big stadium. Each they have one section for the individual patient. So we see we isolate them collectively, not at home, because at home they will spread the virus a certain proportion to their family.
And if the patient has only IgM positive, but PCR negative, what do you think? What should we do?
Normally, you have to continue to test the nucleic acid.
Okay.
Because the sampling technique is very important. You need to test several times.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Dear colleagues, I'm glad to see you. Professor Shao, could you please answer my question? The first one, have you observed long-term persistence of IgM among your patient?
I do not have that detailed information. I just heard the IgM usually they quickly they become the IgG positive, IgM declining pretty fast.
What period of time?
I don't have the detail. How long? I have the data here. Like the first week of infection, the IgM positivity is like a 28%. In the second week, the IgM is 73%. After the third week, the IgM positivity is over 90%.
Что такое?
Yeah, it's in the first 3 weeks, the IgM positivity increased from 28 to 49%. I do not have data for longer duration IgM. So in the first 3 weeks, it's increased from 28, second week to 70, and third week to over 90 IgM.
Okay, thank you so much. I've got 2 questions. What test is better for the population screening? What do you think?
Значит, ТКМ, скажи.
In China, usually, because we try to control the spread at the early stage, so we mainly use nucleic acid real-time PCR to pick up the patients as early as possible. But their study data recommended that to use both nucleic acid and combined antibody assay, nucleic acid and total antibody test combined is the best way to do the population study.
Can I ask you what antibody test do you use? IgM or IgG?
We saw that the total antibody will be better. They are more sensitive, more specific with the total antibody.
And I've got the last question. What do you think? Does it need verification for serology tests or not?
Yeah, you have to do validation because there are so many test kits from different companies. You know, the technology is different. You know, if you use simple technology as indirect ELISA format, it's not as sensitive as the sandwich antigen sandwich technology ELISA. So it's like for HIV, indirect is the 2nd generation, sandwich test is the 4th generation.
Thank you so much.
So you verify, Jimin, you verify positive with other kids. What's your strategy? You think you need verification of positive cases, correct?
Yeah, we verify. We use like good panels, confirmed positive patients serum at like first week, very early, 2nd week, 3rd week, and we use a serology panel and to verify different cases. Yeah.
Professor Zhao, you told that 80% of EGM positive are PCR positive. I guess that it is the first week of the disease. And what about such long cases, 3rd week, when you said more than 20% IgM positive? What percent would be of PCR positive from that long?
I don't have that data.
Because sometimes we see such long cases in our workers in hospital.
Oh.
Maybe we can imagine that long contact maybe works in such a way, but usually we don't have PCR positive at the same time in that cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could ask my colleagues who take care of patients and for that the answer for you. Yeah, I can ask.
Thank you very much. Now we're also gathering our statistics, but it will be very helpful that if you tell us your opinion also. And thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hello. Hello, dear colleagues, and my question maybe to Professor Shao and to Professor Margolis. What do you think when we will have the vaccine? Do we need to screen the population for the antibodies before that? What's the strategy?
Yeah. I'm in the vaccine review committee. We have approved 5 vaccines for clinical trial. The 5 vaccines, 4 of them are the inactivated viral vaccine. And 1 is adeno5 vector vaccine. The last one, we are just to review it, will be approved soon. It's an mRNA vaccine. The 5 already approved. 3 of them already finished the phase 2 trial. The safety data is pretty good. They can generating high titer binding antibody. They have this both IgM or IgG to S protein to N protein. You know, it's an inactivated vaccine. They have the whole virus there. They also generating the not very high, but decent neutralizing antibodies. Because the incidence is very low in China. Before the Beijing, this episode, new cases, we have only 1 digital cases every day. Actually, Beijing has no new cases for over close to 2 months. So close to 60 days now we have new cases, but it's still in low number. These companies, they are in discussing with other countries in collaboration for phase 3 trials outside China. They may start trial next month. So we could get some results if they are smoothly start phase 3 trial next month. Maybe in the autumn, we should got the data already. But the US, I think the US, Dr. Margolis should know their vaccine development.
Yes, and also it's a question when we have vaccine, you can answer in different levels. And that's exactly what some politicians use. This terminology is very vague. To a certain extent, we have the vaccine because it has developed. It's not so difficult to develop vaccine, but develop efficient vaccine and safe vaccine. That's what the task, as Professor Shao said. In my institute, we have this Moderna vaccine development, which is supported by our institute, especially NIAID, headed with Professor Fauci, who some of us know. And the question, and I think it's this citation belongs to Dr. Fauci. There is one thing which is worse than a vaccine, is a bad vaccine. So it needs efficient testing. I know that in all the countries, in most countries, now the regulations which exist now are loosening because you have to test more quickly because the public requires quicker vaccines than it's normally developed, which takes years and years. So if we talk about some of it, but so many vaccines as Dr. Shao are developing, I'm sure that at least one or two of them would be successful. And then you have to test them in a big number of individuals. And as Professor Shao told rightly, that vaccine should be tested not in the place where there is no infection, like HIV vaccine has been tested, continue to test it, potential vaccine, in the countries with a high rate of infection. So if in Wuhan there is no infection, only 300 probably even not infected, it's useless to use vaccine in this area. You should use vaccine in areas where is high infection to have statistics. And that may happen finally, I think, as every expert says, not earlier than in the beginning of the next year, even jumping over several stages. But testing stage 1 and stage 2 can be done very quickly, maybe by the fall.
Yeah. The manufacturer, our president in the WHO summit already announced that the Chinese vaccine will become international public good. So we will provide to all countries. The company I know, I reviewed there, the two companies, the government ones, they can produce, each of them can produce 200 million doses in the year, with their current production capacity.
And which of these vaccines these two are? You mentioned several vaccines. Which are these two?
These two are the inactivated vaccine. Actually, they grown their virus in China CDC Bio3 lab, and then they inactivated in their facility. So there are 4 companies, one in Beijing, 2 in Beijing, one in Wuhan, the epicenter, and another in Kunming in the southwest China. So the 4 companies are.
But it's the same inactivated virus vaccine, right?
Yeah, it's the same inactivated virus. There's another military medical institute academy. They manufacture. They did the adeno-5 vector vaccine also in Beijing.
Can I just clarify a little bit? Do you see, do you think that screening for the population immunity is important when you plan the vaccination of some population or some cohort of people?
It's depending on the which country you are in. I heard, I read some report. It's like in New York, maybe 10 to 15% of people already have antibodies. Maybe in London, also maybe 10%. But in China, it's around 2% in the Wuhan, in the epicenter. In anywhere else, it's very low. It's less than 0.1%. So the most people are still naive. You may not necessary to do screening, but in some high in prevalence city, but maybe they still, maybe some people do not need vaccines, they already have antibodies. You need to do some screening. Maybe London or New York?
May I add a little bit complexity. Of course, we don't know still, even in people who have these antibodies, how long they persist and how protective they are. That's a big unknown, which makes answer to your Igor's question very difficult. The second point is we don't know whether if we vaccinate people who have already antibodies, whether it's either useful or we don't know even whether it's maybe dangerous to vaccinate people who already have these antibodies. And the third point, of course, I think you read this recent paper in Cell, there is a technique of antibody measurement. Of course, it's very easy, as Professor Shao said, there are many tests, and you can really measure population-wide this way. But there are some people who never developed antibodies, but still can be immune due to the cellular immunity. And this cellular immunity is a big enigma on in combination of antibody immunity. Because first of all, we don't have tests. We have tests, laboratory tests to measure cell immunity, but there is no such easy test to measure it on population-wide. And Professor Gushin can confirm this. So whether some people, and 1% of them are immune without antibody, it's a big question. So there is still a lot of complexity in this.
Thank you very much. I'll just add a couple of words about the cellular immunity. We know that such tests exist for tuberculosis. It's interferon gamma release assay, and it might be useful, but still we need additional evaluation how useful it would be. Do we need to use interferon, or we need to use other markers of cytokines? And it's actually interesting story.
It's very interesting, and plus, even coming back to Igor's question, developing a vaccine, what does it mean? We know, for example, the flu vaccine was developed, but it's applied to different ages of population. And there is a special way of vaccination of people who are older compared to people who are younger. So that's another dimension of complexity for the vaccine against COVID-19, which we do develop. Should they apply to all the population, to particular age stratums of population? It's all questions which we should answer.
Yeah.
But for all these questions, of course, as all of us know, and we discussed it with Professor Mazurs, you need, of course, reliable, confirmed tests for antibody immunity, which should be reevaluated in some cases with as high and high efficiency tests. And that would be needed not only to give the people ideas that they can walk safely, maybe yes, maybe not, but for sure for strategy of vaccine testing. That should be done independently of whether we know how long is immunity stays in the human body. Yeah, Alexei.
Maybe your question is targeted to if the serology test can be used together with the vaccine in the vaccine trials. I think the people who participate in the vaccine trial, it's better to have an easy serology test to distinguish between the natural infection by a coronavirus and the vaccine stimulated antibody. So because if you do a phase 3 trial involve a lot of people, if the people has antibody, may be considered as infected people, have to be contained or isolated, cannot finish the study. If you develop an easy test to distinguish between vaccine-induced antibody and the natural infection-induced antibody will be very useful.
Yeah, I agree. But what kind of such test do you imagine to distinguish these two cases?
I think since most of the vaccine developer use S protein, you need to develop another antigen like N protein or M protein to distinguish between the natural infection and the vaccine stimulated immunity.
But this vaccine, Chinese vaccines, which you mentioned, are in process of developing. If there are whole viral particles, so there should be antibodies to all antigens, isn't it?
Yeah, that.
It's not only S.
There's only Chinese company make this kind of vaccine. All the others, they use only S. The Chinese one, you have to use nucleic acid test to distinguish.
Я с удовольствием сегодня, с особым удовольствием вот увидел именно Шао. Мы очень давно не общались, и мне кажется, получился чрезвычайно интересный разговор.
I'm really grateful, especially to Professor Shao, to discuss this topic today.
Наверное, в этом есть какая-то... Ну, так и должно быть, что после некоторой паузы вот возникают очень много интересных вопросов, и есть что, так сказать, там обсудить, если люди действительно дружат и занимаются одним делом.
I think that especially after a long break, people could have really productive discussion.
Я поймал себя на мысли, что, конечно, мы сегодня не в полном составе, нету Юрдена Рокштера, нету Майкла Лидермана, они могут на следующей неделе. И я думаю, что если Имен не возражает, мы это обозначим как первая часть разговора на эту тему.
Unfortunately, Professor Rockstra and Professor Lieberman couldn't join us today, but they said that they have free time next week, and probably today's discussion will be a part 2 of our topic about immunology of COVID-19.
Профессор Марголис, как обычно, мне сделал замечание и направил мне программу, которая позволяет определить, когда всем удобно встречаться вот в таком формате. И я направлю предложение профессору Шау в ближайшие дни для следующей встречи.
Почему же это замечание? Это скорее помощь, assistance.
Хорошо, это был ассист. Хорошо. Но мы исправимся в любом случае, Леонид.
So Professor Margolis sent me an app that allows to track time of every person, and I will send this app to Professor Shao so we can find out what the best day and time for the next meeting.
Мы, конечно, не обсудили, это было бы не очень правильно обсуждать без них вопросы лечения больных, новых новостей в лечении новой коронавирусной инфекции. Их много, и они там интересные, поэтому давайте попробуем это сделать на следующей неделе, когда у всех совпадут возможности по времени и дню недели.
So today we didn't discuss topics about coronavirus disease treatment because I think it's suitable to discuss it with Professor Grokstro and Lieberman. But I think that next week, when we all have time and specific day when we all can gather together, we will discuss these topics because there are many new things happened.
У нас за рамками остался важнейший для нас вопрос, который мы все там обсуждаем. Это все-таки вопрос верификации серологической диагностики.
There are many important topics that we need to discuss, and one of the most important is verification of serological tests.
У нас пока нету в регистрации, нету в наличии в нашей стране тестов на антиген, они только планируются к регистрации. Насколько я знаю, несколько компаний планируют выйти, но пока их нет.
So, unfortunately, in Russia, we don't have a registered test for antigens.
Мы предлагали и думаем, что очень близко к решению нашей коллеги из CDC, предложивших верификацию 100% тестом по специфичности, если мы работаем на более низком уровне серодиагностики, уже появились такие тесты на рынке.
I think that the best test so far is the test that made by CDC with high specificity.
Мы понимаим, что для нас не очень важны верификация подтверждения иммуноглобулина G, но если мы видим положительный тест на иммуноглобулин M, мы должны принимать меры, потому что человек может в данный момент болеть, и, соответственно, нам точно нужна верификация.
We now understand that IgG test not so important as IgM test, but we think that if we have IgM test positive, we need a verification.
Ну, собственно, я предлагаю с этого начать в следующий раз.
So I think that it would be the first topic that we will discuss.
Подумать и, так сказать, там обсудить этот вопрос. И именно я бы хотел передать тебе еще раз слово для завершения нашей встречи, потом профессору Марголису и профессору Гущину, и, наверное, вы уже скажете финальное слово, профессор Николай.
So now I will turn the floor over to Professor Shao and then Professor Margolis, and I think that Professor Gushin and Professor Nikolov will finish our meeting today.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to join the conference. I think the communication is between scientists in different countries is very important. We are at the early stage. We got a lot of help from the different countries, scientists. And now our situation is getting quiet, so we can provide some our experience to share with our colleagues in other countries. Beijing now is it become very stringent, tight, so we be busy again. I just returned from a visit. Beijing people are now is not welcomed by other provinces in China because we become the second epizone. We hope we could control this in maybe in a few weeks. Because the government is better prepared. We hope we can finish that. Thank you.
Professor Margolis, your microphone turned off.
Sorry, I think such meeting is very important, first of all, because we exchange our views and know what's happening in other countries, like very interesting data from China. Unfortunately, in the United States, in 22 states, there are spikes of new wave of coronavirus infection, and mostly because people feel that the release of this restriction, not many wear masks. I even walked here in where I live in Bethesda, very few people wear masks, and that inevitably would bring to the next spike of infection in any country where it's released. So we need to know more about medical approach for protection and especially treating people, and measure, as Professor Mazur said, a reliable measure, whether it need verification or whatever, how to differentiate people who are infected, have been infected, and which are not infected. And the other thing I should emphasize, it's very clear that we're in the very beginning of understanding what does coronavirus do to human body. For 30 years, we studied it with HIV and still don't know exactly. And that needs people from different corners of scientific fields to understand. I must say that in coronavirus, because of this attack, we know much more than if we compare to the early stage of HIV infection. But based on HIV infection, which many of us study for years, it's very clear that we have a long, long road ahead of us to understand what does coronavirus, besides infecting these particular cells, what it does for coagulation, what it does for other organs. And for this, we need such meetings where we exchange our knowledge, both practical and basic. And thank you very much to organizers.
Dear colleagues, yes, my flow. Dear colleagues, thank you very much for such a good meeting. I think it was very interesting to know opinions from people from other countries, and especially it was very interesting to know about such good approaches in China, and especially in these extraordinary testings on Wuhan. I think it's a really interesting experience, and especially it was very nice to know about opinions, and especially China's approach on vaccine development. I think that such knowledge exchange will definitely bring us to some kind of collaboration. Now it's clear that we need to think on these verification methods. Maybe we think to start to think about other antigens and cellular tests, and I hope that we will discuss it more precisely next time on these different approaches, and I hope that we will initiate this fruitful collaboration. Thank you very much, all participants and organizers.
Professor Vassilieva, please give us some comments.
Thank you. I want to thank all participants, and especially Professor Mazus and Professor Nikonov, who organized this meeting. In Russia, we say that you must leave the table and stop eating when you are still hungry a little. And today, this meeting is just the same. I have a lot of questions, but I stopped myself, and I will postpone them for the second meeting, and I hope it will be very soon. So thanks to everybody.
Thank you.
Спасибо большое. Коллеги, и в заключение, конечно, мир изменился после появления коронавирусной инфекции, нам теперь с ней жить.
So just concluding, I would say that the world changed after coronavirus epidemic.
Мы очень обеспокоены той ситуацией, которая сейчас складывается в Пекине в связи с появлением очага на очередном рынке, очаг из товара, поставленного из Европы, связанный с употреблением свежезамороженной рыбы.
So we are sorry that in Beijing you have a new epidemic of coronavirus that came to a fishing market from Europe.
Как человек, рожденный очень близко к Китаю, я до сих пор удивляюсь, зачем Китай привозит рыбу из Европы, имея массу морей. Вот. Но, тем не менее, нам впереди предстоит очень много трудиться по поводу лечения новой коронавирусной инфекции. Я вам всем желаю крепкого здоровья, берегите себя, берегите свое здоровье, своих близких. Если профессор Миншау как-то прокомментирует, мы будем очень и очень рады. В конце я могу сказать только слово «зянтинь».
So first of all, I just wonder, I was born near China and I always wonder why you're buying fish from Europe because you have a lot of fish in your country. And also like other comments that of course we still need to treat our patient and find new treatment strategies. And because of this, I wish to have wish heaven help for your family and for yourself. Please take care. Please, Professor, share a comment about this fishing stuff. Why you bring fish from Europe?
How
actually, this farm market is selling different food, vegetable, meat, and fish. They found in the salmon, so we don't have a salmon in China, so we import quite a few. But we don't think the virus is carried by the fish from Europe because we just analyze the virus because they already after about 5 months, there are different subtypes of the coronavirus. This episode is a European subtype. It's not the Wuhan subtype. But that doesn't mean is carried by the fish. But I think it's many human to human transmission. Maybe the people who handling fish got infected, they may be contaminated the fish. But when we test more fish, the source of the fish is no virus. So I think to control the coronavirus, the key is to in your community to build an early warning system by doing testing, find the early infection quickly and contain it, suppress it. You don't need to build a wall like Trump mentioned. You need a wall, but you need to prepare your citizen, prepare your society to deal with this virus. The virus can go everywhere. So if you have a good public health system, you have your good the people in the CDC and hospital, they work together in collaboration, and the people, your citizen, collaborate with the government for all the way to contain. You will be successful. It doesn't rely on war.
И бояться нужно не рыбы, а людей. Такой вывод.
Professor Margolis said that we need to afraid not of fish, but human beings.
Yeah.
Большое спасибо. Мы заканчиваем. Я надеюсь, до скорой встречи. Огромная благодарность вам, профессор Марголис, вам, профессор Шао. профессор Васильева, профессор Гай. Академик Лагунов нас слушает, член-корреспондент академик Лагунов. Профессор Гущин, спасибо всем огромное, до новых встреч.
Thank you very much for this meeting, and we hope to see you soon.
Bye-bye. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.